Sir, I don't understand.
That's glaringly apparent.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Movie Review. Today's movie in question being The Holdovers, directed by Alexander Payne. I have not seen any other of Alexander Payne's movies, but from this single movie that I've seen, he seems like a very talented, very stylistically capable director, because this movie is gorgeous, from the cinematography to the music and the ridiculously well-written characters. This movie has a lot to offer. So just to sort of summarize the plot simply, this movie follows a group, at least at the start, of holdovers, and they're all being led and commanded around by Paul Giamatti's character, Paul Hunnam, and they struggle with his over-the-top, super extreme, very uniform teaching sense. He's a very old teacher. You've probably had a teacher like him before. That very strict, kind of rigid guideline on how you should learn. And because of this, the rambunctious boarding school students really don't get along with him, and pretty much everyone at the school hates him. And that is where the main story is brought from, because the main character, next to Paul Giamatti, Angus, is slowly molding around Paul's character to start to understand and not love him, but see him as more than just an evil teacher, which is what most of the school sees him as exclusively. Now, all the while Paul and Angus are duking it out, Divine Joy Randolph's character Mary Lamb is dealing with the loss of her son in the Vietnam War, and this is a completely different angle of trauma, because Paul and Angus suffer from emotional trauma, like lack of friends, lack of supportive family kind of thing. But Mary Lamb lost her son, and through the movie she's trying to act cool about it, she's trying to act nonchalant about it, and there are little glimpses at how she truly feels, and sees little things that remind her of him. And eventually this leads to the crescendo almost of the boiling over point, where she can't handle it anymore. She's a couple drinks deep at a party, and she breaks down in the kitchen crying about the son that she lost. And it really makes you empathize with not only her, but all three characters, because if she is comparable to these other two, they've also been through like really awful, miserable stuff, and you feel bad. You feel like you could know these people, and they could be crying on your shoulder the next day, and you'd have to sit there and support them, whether you wanted to or not. And that makes this movie so memorable and so wonderfully written. So now I'm going to start talking about the spoilers. If you have not seen this movie yet, please go see it in theaters. If not for anything, then for the wonderfully written characters and the beautiful looking movie itself. It is absolutely worth your time and worth your $12 or whatever ridiculous price it is to get into the cinemas. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about story details now. So, I think where this movie really shines is when Angus and Paul go to Boston, and, Mary Lamb is there too, but she's there for, not in Boston, but she's there for like 2 minutes and she's gone. But this movie really shines when Paul and Angus are walking through Boston, and just almost like, it's almost like a father and son thing, and it really feels like they trust each other in Boston. It feels like they can be themselves around each other, and they don't have to put up any walls to stay safe kind of thing. It feels like they got through their character arc, and this is where it's led to. It's led to Boston. And two of the most exposing pieces of evidence about the characters are revealed in Boston, and it feels totally justified, and they completely understand on both sides, and you can tell there's that true sense of not only connection but safety now in that relationship between the two. So in Boston, the viewer finds out that Paul was kicked out of Harvard because he hit a student with his car. His roommate, in fact, because his roommate was copying off of his thesis. And this completely changes the already changed view that Angus had of Paul, because now he sees him not only as slightly cool teacher now that he knows him, and kind of a weirdo, but he sees him as a real guy. He sees him as just as emotional and just as kind of reactionary as he himself is. And that's when Angus starts to really trust Paul. And it's not up until Angus's secret, which is that his dad is actually in a mental asylum and not in a graveyard, that they both really trust each other. After this, it feels like there's this true sense of camaraderie, because they've both been through so much with each other that there's kind of no other choice but to be close, to be emotionally connected, and to really care for one another. And the movie shines. Those last, 20-25 minutes where they just know each other, it's like a father-son dynamic, and it's just so wholesome, so enjoyable to watch. All these little jokes getting thrown around, and they have the flaming ice cream in the parking lot, and Paul has to throw it off his car and put it out with his boot because he put too much bourbon on it. And it's just such a cute, even if it's only for a couple scenes, it's such a wholesome, great way to kind of end their shared character arc. I think the final scene, the final act that Paul does for Angus really sums up their arc really well, where Paul takes the fall and gets fired from his teaching position to save Angus's skin from getting expelled from the school, because Paul finally realizes that he's destined for better things and that Angus needs to keep doing education, because he realizes that this kid is not a genius, not yet anyway, but he is really smart, and that to kick a kid out of this school and throw him into military school at this point would be squandering massive potential, and if he needs to get himself fired to keep that from happening, he will, and he does. And Paul feels truly changed and a truly almost reborn man. He says to Mary, he says, I'm gonna go down to Europe, I'm gonna write my little half book I forgot the name of, and I'm gonna do what I want. And it feels like Paul has finally moved on from being that cranky teacher, and it feels totally deserved in every sense of the word. Moving away from the story to talk about some of the more artistic aspects of the movie, I really appreciate the movie's time setting. The time setting, normally in movies it feels kind of like a smaller, insignificant thing, but for some reason that late 60s, early 70s aesthetic that the movie carries really fits with the way the characters act, the way people talk to each other, the way Paul especially is so afraid and not really willing to open up, and why Angus thinks he's such a weirdo for not having a wife or a girlfriend or anything like that. The 70s and late 60s really capture that feeling really well, and it does a lot for the movie's presentation. And when you combine that excellent time setting and excellent cinematography and excellent story, excellent character writing, excellent score, you combine all these things together, it makes for a movie that flows so perfectly and that just works so well. And to my knowledge anyway, there really isn't much to compare it to, because it feels so tonally different from most other movies of this nature. And that's what I really appreciate about this movie, because it's not easy to do something kind of tried and make it feel new, and this movie absolutely achieves that. So to summarize, I definitely recommend you watch this movie in theaters if you still can. It was absolutely worth it for me. I'm sorry if in this video I sound a little more low energy. I'm just very tired right now. I hope you enjoyed my schizo ramblings about this great movie. Please leave comments if I can improve, or if you want me to change something. I read all of them, I promise. And again, please go watch the Holdovers, and I hope you had a good time. Like, subscribe, share, and I will see you in the movies.